My estranged uncle left me while revealing my wife's affair and family secrets. I wasn't expected to face. I was halfway through another exhausting day at work when my phone buzzed on the desk. The number was unfamiliar, and for a second, I considered letting it go to voicemail. Something inside me told me to pick it up. "Mr. Carter?" A calm male voice asked. "This is Mr. Daniels, an attorney handling the estate of your late uncle." For a moment, I thought I misheard him. My uncle? I hadn't spoken to that man in over 15 years. He was more like a shadow in our family history than an actual presence. I could barely recall his face without digging through old memories of dusty family gatherings where he would sit in the corner, mostly ignored. "Yes, that's me," I answered cautiously. The lawyer cleared his throat and explained, in that flat professional tone, that my uncle had passed away 2 weeks ago. No big family announcement, no one reaching out to me, just a phone call from a stranger informing me of his death. And then came the real shock. In his will, the lawyer continued, your uncle left you his countryside property. The house, the land, everything. You're the sole inheritor. I felt my stomach drop. I hadn't even known my uncle owned a house, let alone why he would give it to me, of all people. The man barely spoke to me when he was alive. The rest of the day was a blur. I sat at my desk staring at spreadsheets, pretending to work while my mind replayed that phone call on loop. Why me? What did this house represent? Was it some kind of unfinished business, or just a meaningless gesture from a man who lived on the edge of our family circle? That night, over dinner, I told my wife, Anna, about the inheritance. I expected her to react with curiosity, maybe even excitement. An unexpected house was at least something out of the ordinary in our otherwise routine life. But her reaction was wrong. Her fork paused halfway to her mouth. Her eyes flickered with something I couldn't name. Recognition, maybe? Then she quickly forced a smile and said, "Well, that's surprising. What kind of house is it?" I explained the little I knew, but she didn't ask the questions I expected. "No, when do we go see it? Or do you think we could sell it?" Instead, she changed the subject almost instantly, steering the conversation toward our kids and bills as if the inheritance was nothing more than a trivial inconvenience. The unease gnawed at me for the rest of the night. Why did she look so unsettled? Why did she want to brush it off so quickly? Something told me this inheritance was more than just an old house, that I couldn't sleep that night. My wife lay beside me, breathing softly, her hand draped across my chest like nothing in the world was wrong. But in my head, something was wrong. There was this gnawing feeling I couldn't shake. It wasn't one single thing. It was little pieces that never added up. Fragments of moments that suddenly felt suspicious now that I was looking at them differently. Like the way she always seemed overly defensive if I asked where she'd been. Or how she clutched her phone a little too tightly, turning the screen away when I walked into the room. At the time, I brushed it off as me being paranoid, as if I'd be some controlling asshole if I pushed too much. But lying there in the dark, I started to wonder, had I been blind? The thought spread like poison. I got up, quietly, trying not to wake her, and walked into the kitchen. I poured myself a glass of water, staring out into the backyard where the moonlight hit the swing set. The kids had begged for that swing set. I built it with my own hands, piece by piece, imagining all three of them growing up together, laughing, fighting, just being kids. And then my brain twisted the image into something uglier. What if one of them isn't even mine? I shook my head hard, trying to dismiss the thought. "Don't be dramatic," I muttered under my breath. But it stuck. It clung to me like a shadow. I told myself I had no reason to think that. No evidence. No real proof. Just instincts. And yet, I'd learned a long time ago that instincts rarely come out of nowhere. The next morning, I couldn't even look at her the same way. She kissed me before leaving to drop the kids off at school, and I forced myself to act normal. But the kiss felt different now, like I was being poisoned and smiling through it. That day at work, I couldn't concentrate. The question was drilling into my skull. So, I did something I never thought I'd do. I opened a browser tab and searched for paternity test services. My hand hovered over the mouse for a long time. Ordering a test felt like crossing a line I couldn't uncross. Because if I was wrong, if I was just paranoid, then I'd be betraying her trust in a way that might destroy us. But if I was right, then she'd already betrayed me first that I didn't order the kit that day. But I saved the page. And for the rest of the week, I felt like I was living in two realities at once. The surface. where we were a normal married couple with 3 kids and soccer practice and family dinners, and the undercurrent, where I was drowning in suspicion, choking on the possibility that everything I thought I knew might be a lie. And for the first time in our marriage, when she said, "I love you," that night, I didn't know if I believed it got worse. The doubts didn't fade with time, they grew claws. Every glance at my wife became an interrogation in my head. Every smile from her looked like a cover-up. And every time my middle son, Ethan, laughed, I couldn't stop myself from looking at his face, really looking, searching for pieces of me that maybe weren't there, that I hated myself for it. I love that boy. I've loved him since the second I held him in the delivery room, tiny and fragile, screaming like he owned the world. But once the thought got inside my head that maybe he wasn't mine, it poisoned everything that I started pulling away from my wife. She noticed. "Are you okay?" she asked one night while folding laundry. "You've been off lately." I wanted to tell her everything. I wanted to scream the truth at her, force her to confess, force her to give me something that made sense. But the words caught in my throat. Because what if she looked me dead in the eyes and admitted it? What if she said, "Yes, Ethan isn't yours. I've been lying to you for over a decade." Would I survive hearing that? Instead, I just shrugged. "Work's been rough?" I muttered. She accepted it too easily, too calmly. That scared me even more. The breaking point came one Saturday morning. Ethan had a soccer game. I stood there on the sidelines with the other parents, cheering when he scored a goal. He ran across the field, his hair bouncing in the wind, and for just a second, I swore I saw another man in his features. Not me, not my family. Someone else. My chest tightened so hard I had to step back. I couldn't breathe. One of the other dads asked if I was okay, and I just nodded, pretending I was fine. But I wasn't fine. I wasn't even close to fine. That night, after everyone went to bed, I pulled up that bookmarked website again. This time, I didn't hesitate. My fingers moved like they belonged to someone else. I ordered the paternity test kit. My hands were shaking so bad when I hit confirm order that I almost dropped my phone. And then I sat in the dark kitchen, staring at nothing, feeling like I'd just signed the death certificate for my marriage. Because once those results came back, there would be no going back. But I had to know. I needed to know. The package showed up on a Wednesday afternoon. Just a plain brown box, no markings that gave away the weight of what it contained. I found it sitting on the porch when I got home from work, like it had been waiting for me all day, daring me to pick it up. My hands trembled as I carried it inside. It was heavier than it looked, or maybe that was just the pressure crushing down on me. I hid it under my jacket and went straight to the garage, not even saying hello to my wife. I couldn't let her see it. I shut the garage door, sat on the cold cement floor, and ripped it open. Inside were sterile swabs, envelopes, instructions printed in bold letters. It all looked so clinical, so emotionless. But to me, it felt like I was holding a live grenade. That night, I waited until everyone was asleep. The house was silent except for the occasional creak of the walls settling. I crept into Ethan's room, my chest pounding like a drum. He was sprawled out across the bed, one arm hanging off the side, his mouth open slightly as he breathed deeply in sleep. For a moment, I just stood there, watching him. He looked so peaceful, so innocent. My throat tightened. What the hell am I doing? I thought. This was my son. The boy I'd kissed goodnight 1,000 times. The kid who called me dad. With no hesitation, no doubt. Was I really about to swab his cheek and send it off like some kind of criminal? I almost backed out. Almost shoved the whole kit back in the box and burned it. But then I remembered that moment on the soccer field, that flash of someone else's face in his features, and my resolve snapped back into place. With a shaking hand, I gently swabbed the inside of his cheek. He stirred, and I froze, holding my breath. But he didn't wake up. He just shifted and mumbled something before rolling onto his side. When it was over, I sealed the sample in the envelope, my hands slick with sweat. I repeated the process with my own swab in the bathroom, staring at myself in the mirror the whole time. My reflection looked like a stranger, haunted, desperate, guilty. The next morning, I slipped the package into the mailbox before anyone else was awake. It was gone, out of my hands, and all that was left to do was wait. Waiting felt like torture. The days after I mailed the test blurred together, but not in the comforting, routine kind of way. Each hour dragged, heavy and suffocating, like I was living underwater. I'd go through the motions at work, but half the time I couldn't remember what I'd done by the end of the day. My coworkers probably thought I was burned out, but no one asked. No one knew that I was waiting for something that could either confirm my deepest fears or pull me back from the edge of insanity. Every time I checked my phone, I half hoped, half dreaded seeing a notification from the lab. Nothing. Just junk emails, work reminders, and texts from my wife asking me to grab groceries on the way home at night. Lying beside her in bed, I'd hear her steady breathing as she slept, and my mind would twist itself into knots. Did she know? Did she have any idea that I was doing this? I couldn't look at her without wondering if she was silently laughing at me, if she thought she'd buried her secret so deep it would never surface. Ethan was the hardest part. Every time he called me dad, I felt a pang in my chest. When he laughed at something dumb on TV, I caught myself studying his face, his expressions. Did he really look like me? Or was I just desperate to see a resemblance? One night, he came into my office while I was pretending to work. He leaned against the doorframe with that same cocky grin he'd gotten recently. "Hey, Dad, want to come shoot hoops?" It nearly broke me. My first instinct was to say no. I didn't think I could handle being near him, not while this storm brewed inside me. But I saw the hope in his eyes, the way he looked at me like I was the center of his world. So I forced a smile, grabbed the basketball, and followed him outside that we played under the dim porch light, the sound of the ball hitting the driveway echoing through the quiet neighborhood. Every time he shouted, "Your turn, Dad," it cut through me. I couldn't tell if I wanted the test to prove me right or to prove me wrong. That'd be why the time we went inside, sweaty and laughing, I felt like a fraud. A man pretending to be something he wasn't sure he had the right to be. And still, the results hadn't come. The waiting was killing me more than the truth ever could. It was a Thursday morning when the envelope finally arrived. I found it sitting on the kitchen counter, plain and unassuming, like any other piece of mail. But I knew, the second I saw it, that it was the one. I froze. My hands shook as I reached for it, my mind screaming at me to walk away, to ignore it, to protect myself from whatever nightmare was inside. But I couldn't. Not anymore. I tore it open, the paper crinkling loudly in the silence. Inside was a single sheet with the results printed in bold letters. I didn't even need to read them at first, I knew. My stomach churned as I scanned the numbers, the percentage. Ethan. He's not mine. The world stopped. My knees buckled, and I sank to the floor, staring at the paper as if it were some cruel joke. 11 years. 11 years of believing he was my son. 11 years of loving him as my own. And it had all been a lie. I felt every emotion at once. Rage, betrayal, grief, disbelief. I wanted to scream, to throw the paper across the room, to wake my wife and demand an explanation. But I couldn't move. My mind was a whirlwind, a storm of memories twisting into accusations I hadn't dared to form before. The mornings I kissed him, the late-night talks, the scraped knees and soccer victories, they all felt stolen. My trust shattered into pieces too small to ever piece back together. When I finally stood up, I could feel the anger coursing through me, sharp and cold. And I knew I had to face her. I had to know the truth directly from her lips. When she came into the kitchen later, humming some tune she liked, I barely recognized her. Everything about her suddenly seemed alien, like she was someone I thought I knew but never really did. I held the test in my hand. Her eyes met mine, and she immediately sensed something. "What is it?" she asked cautiously, trying to mask the panic that flickered across her face. I didn't answer right away. I just stared. My chest felt tight, and my mind raced with the words I would say, the accusations I would throw at her. "You've been hiding this for how long?" I finally asked, my voice trembling despite myself. Her face went pale. She opened her mouth, then closed it. And that pause, that terrible, guilty pause, was everything I needed to know. The truth was coming, and it was going to hurt more than anything I'd ever imagined. I couldn't wait any longer. That evening, I cornered her in the living room, the test clenched tightly in my hand. The kids were at their grandparents' for the weekend. Thank God, because I knew I couldn't handle this in front of them. Her eyes widened the moment she saw the paper. "Is that?" she started, but I cut her off. Don't even start pretending you didn't know this moment would come." I snapped, my voice sharper than I intended. "I have the results. Ethan, he's not mine. Tell me why. Tell me the truth. Now." She sank into the couch, her hands trembling. I never meant for you to find out this way, she whispered. Her voice was shaky, almost a sob. It happened years ago. I was confused. I, I didn't know how to tell you. I was afraid you'd leave. I still am afraid. Afraid. That word cut deeper than any lie ever could. 11 years of fear had driven her to betray me. 11 years of my life spent believing in a family that wasn't completely mine. You didn't tell me, I hissed. You've been living with this secret all this time? Did you ever think about me? About us? About Ethan? Did you even care? Tears welled up in her eyes, but I didn't feel sorry for her. Not anymore. I, I did care. I love you, I love our family. But I made a mistake. One that I've regretted every single day. Mistake. That word made me laugh bitterly. Mistake. 11 years of lies, hidden faces, and stolen trust. And she called it a mistake that I wanted to hit something, scream, throw everything in the house across the room. Instead, I just stood there, trembling, trying to process the storm inside me. Do you even realize what you've done? How much you've destroyed? She nodded, silently acknowledging her betrayal. And in that moment, I realized this wasn't just about Ethan, or even about the affair. This was about the foundation of our life, the very thing I thought was solid and real, and it had cracked in a way that might never heal. I left the room, pacing, trying to think. What now? Could I forgive her? Could I even stay in the same house with her, knowing this? Or did I need to tear everything down and start over? The answers weren't coming. And as the night grew darker, I felt the weight of a truth I hadn't asked for, but could never unsee. I couldn't sleep that night. My mind refused to quiet itself, replaying moments from the past 11 years like a cruel movie director who loved tormenting me. Every memory suddenly carried a shadow I hadn't noticed before. I thought about Ethan's birth. I remembered holding him, marveling at the tiny hands and fragile limbs, feeling a love I never imagined possible. And now, that memory was poisoned. What I had believed was pure and sacred suddenly felt tainted. Then came the smaller moments, the ones I never paid attention to before. The way she would leave the room when I entered too quickly, the work late, excuses that never quite made sense, the sudden trips to visit friends or family that seemed rushed or unnecessary. I had dismissed them at the time, thinking I was just paranoid. But now, in the stark light of this revelation, everything added up. I remembered the night she cried quietly in the bathroom. I had comforted her, asking what was wrong, and she had smiled weakly, saying, "Just stress." I hadn't thought anything of it. How could I have known she was carrying guilt for a secret that would destroy the very fabric of our family? Even the good memories felt like a trap. Birthday parties, school plays, soccer games. All of them now had this undertone of deception. The irony was crushing. I had built my love for my family on trust, only to realize the foundation had been hollowed out. By the time dawn broke, I had come to a grim realization. This wasn't just about Ethan. It was about all of us. My wife had chosen her desires over honesty, and the consequences now rippled through every part of our life. I felt a mix of grief, rage, and disbelief. But beneath it all, a cold clarity began to form. I had to make a decision, not out of anger, but out of necessity. I had to decide what kind of man I was going to be, what kind of father I could be, and whether our family could ever exist the way it had before. And I knew one thing: nothing would ever be the same again. I knew I couldn't avoid it forever. Ethan's world, and mine, was about to shift in ways neither of us could have imagined. I had to talk to him, to my other two kids too, even if it meant ripping the illusion of our family apart. That evening, after dinner, I asked them to sit down in the living room. They looked up at me with curious eyes, sensing something in my tone, but not quite understanding. I tried to steady my voice, to sound calm, though every word felt like fire on my tongue. "Guys," I began, "there's something we need to talk about. Something important." Their little brows furrowed, and my stomach twisted. I had never seen my oldest, Lucas, so serious. "What is it, Dad?" he asked. I swallowed hard. "How do you explain betrayal, secrets, and truth to children who have never known anything else? How do you make them understand without crushing their innocence?" "There's something about our family that I just found out. I want to be honest with you," I said. I paused, seeing the fear creep into their faces. "Ethan, you're very special to me. But a test shows that I'm not your biological father." Silence. A heavy, suffocating silence. Ethan's face went blank, like he didn't even know how to process it. Lucas looked at me, his eyes wide and searching, and my youngest, little Mia, tilted her head, sensing the tension but not understanding the words. I don't understand, Ethan whispered, his voice trembling. You're still my dad, right? I knelt down to his level, choking back my own tears. Yes, I love you, and that doesn't change. But I need you to understand something. There are things adults have done that sometimes hurt the people we love most. And I need you to trust me while we figure this out. He nodded slowly, his small hands clenching the edge of the couch. Lucas put a comforting hand on Ethan's shoulder. And for a moment, the three of them were just kids, holding onto each other in confusion and fear that I felt a surge of something bitter and sweet all at once. Love, responsibility, pain, rage. I didn't know how we'd get through this, but I knew I had to try. Because if I didn't, the family I thought I had built would crumble completely. That night, I sat alone in the dim glow of the living room lamp, the house quiet except for the occasional creak of the floorboards. I was exhausted, mentally and physically, but sleep refused me. My mind was racing, replaying every betrayal, every lie, every smile that had now become a mask. I had to confront her properly. Not in anger, not with a scream, but in a way that forced the truth out. I needed answers, and I needed to understand why she had done this for so long. And most importantly, I had to protect my kids from further lies. That I drafted a plan in my head, rehearsing every possible reaction. Would she admit it calmly? Would she deny everything? Would she try to manipulate me, plead for forgiveness, or turn it around on me? The uncertainty gnawed at my stomach. That I walked to the kitchen and grabbed a notebook, scribbling down points I needed to cover. Why did you cheat? How long did it happen? Who else knows? How can we move forward, if at all? I paused, staring at the paper. Even the act of writing it down made it painfully real. This wasn't a hypothetical anymore. This was our life, our family, our future, or the lack of one. I thought about the kids. I couldn't let this conversation happen when they were around. Not yet. They were still processing the revelation, still clinging to the only father they knew. I needed a moment where the truth could be dealt with fully, privately, without breaking their world further. The anger simmered beneath my skin, but so did something else, an icy, focused determination. I had to know everything, and I had to decide what to do with the information once it came. Could I forgive her? Could I pretend life was normal? Could we rebuild? The clock ticked loudly as I sat in the dark, rehearsing words and emotions, preparing for the confrontation that would define the next chapter of my life. One thing was certain: nothing would ever be the same, and I had to face it head-on. The next evening, I asked her to sit down in the study. I closed the door behind us, cutting off the rest of the world, cutting off any chance of escape. My hands were shaking slightly as I held the results in front of her. She looked at me, a mixture of fear and resignation in her eyes. I know this is coming, she whispered. I didn't respond. I didn't want to give her the satisfaction of seeing me hesitate. Tell me everything, I said, my voice steady but cold. No excuses, no lies. I want the truth about Ethan, about us, about everything you've been hiding. She swallowed hard, her lips quivering. I never planned for this. I loved you, I really did. But, she paused, and I could feel the weight of her guilt pressing down on me like a stone. I made a terrible mistake. Ethan, he isn't yours. It happened years ago, before we even decided to try for another child. I was scared, I didn't know how to tell you, and I thought I could live with the secret, and you'd never find out. I clenched my fists, nails digging into my palms. 11 years of lies, betrayal, and deception, all boiling down to a single word: mistake. Why? How could you do this and still live with us, pretending everything was normal? I demanded. Her shoulders slumped, and tears streamed down her face. I was weak. I didn't want to hurt anyone. I loved you, and I loved the kids. I thought I could make it right later, or that the truth wouldn't matter if I kept loving all of you. I shook my head in disbelief. You destroyed the foundation of everything we built. 11 years of my life, my love, and you thought hiding it was acceptable. Her sobs filled the quiet study, echoing like a hammer on fragile glass. And as I looked at her, I realized that whatever love I had left was mixed with a fury so sharp it cut to my core. I had to decide not just what to say next, but what kind of man I would be from this point forward. Because the next words I spoke, or didn't speak, would define the rest of our lives. The days that followed were a blur of tension, silence, and whispered confrontations. I couldn't look at her the same way, and I couldn't pretend our family was intact. Every corner of the house carried memories now tinged with betrayal. Even the kids' laughter felt like a reminder of the secret that had been festering under the surface for over a decade. I started sleeping in the guest room. She would knock on the door, asking if I wanted to talk, but I couldn't. My anger and heartbreak were too raw, too consuming. And yet, I couldn't entirely detach from them either. Ethan still needed me, whether or not he was my biological son. And that fact made everything unbearably complicated that I caught myself watching him play outside, his small body running across the yard, and I felt both love and bitterness clash inside me. I wanted to scream at him for being part of the lie, but I also wanted to hold him and never let go. Lucas and Mia noticed the change, of course. Lucas, older and sharper, asked pointed questions. "Dad, are we in trouble?" His voice carried suspicion, but also fear. I knelt down to him and tried to explain, carefully. "Nothing is your fault. What's happened is between your mom and me. But we need to figure out how to be a family again." Mia didn't fully understand, yet her small hand reaching for mine reminded me why I couldn't walk away. I had to think through the decisions carefully. Even as my rage simmered, conversations with my wife became tense negotiations. I demanded honesty, demanded she acknowledge the years of lies, the emotional damage done, and the complicated path we now had to navigate. She complied, admitting every painful detail, but the weight of her confessions only made the home feel colder. I realized then that healing wouldn't be immediate. Rebuilding trust wouldn't be a few conversations. It would take years, and even then, scars would remain. But despite everything, one thought remained crystal clear. I couldn't abandon my children. Not Ethan, not Lucas, not Mia, because even in betrayal, love doesn't disappear. It just becomes something heavier, something that carries both pain and responsibility. Weeks passed, and the house remained tense, filled with unspoken words and half-glances. Every day, I weighed the past against the future, trying to decide if there was a path forward, or if our family was irreparably broken. I spent hours alone in the study, the paternity test resting on the desk beside me like a silent judge. I thought about Ethan, the boy I had raised as my own. He didn't deserve to lose his father, even if biologically I wasn't him. My love for him hadn't been conditional, and it wouldn't be now, but my anger toward my wife didn't fade. I couldn't erase the betrayal, the secrecy, the years she had hidden the truth from me. I questioned whether I could trust her again, or if our marriage was just a fragile illusion, destined to collapse under the weight of lies. Late one night, I made a decision. I wouldn't walk away from the children. I couldn't. I would remain a father to Ethan and to Lucas and Mia, regardless of blood. But I also wouldn't allow the marriage to continue blindly. We would attend counseling, face every issue, and rebuild what we could. But it would be a long, painful road. When I told her, she broke down. Relief, guilt, and fear all mingled on her face. I saw the woman I had loved, but also the one who had betrayed me. And in that moment, I realized that forgiveness wouldn't come easily, nor would love return immediately, but I was willing to try, for the children, for the possibility of a family that survived truth instead of collapsing under lies, and for myself. I finally whispered into the darkened bedroom. I needed to remember that love sometimes meant endurance, even when your heart was shattered, that we didn't know what the future held. But we would face it together, or at least I would face it as their father, no matter the cost.